Okay, everybody, welcome to another episode of On the Wrist from Off the Cuff. Today we have another cool Zelos for you that may look a little bit familiar because it's actually a larger take on a model that we've actually reviewed here on the channel already twice before. So with that said, a little bit about the brand. Zelos was founded back in 2014. They are a micro brand startup with a real unique kind of overbuilt design aesthetic. And of course, overbuilding a micro brand watch is something that is a very common practice these days, but their particular aesthetic and the way that they do it, I think they really add some really cool flair and their own style to it, which I think is really, really nice. Now, the type of watch this is, of course, is a dive watch. Some key common characteristics and design language when you're looking for a dive watch is, of course, you're going to want something that is water resistant, normally through some type of screw down crown, something that's tough, legible with a dive time bezel and a diver's extension if on bracelet. And this watch definitely hits all of those marks. Now, this particular watch is the Great White 1,000 meter diver. That's right, it is 1,000 meters water resistant, which is definitely quite a tall order, but I think they definitely execute a watch that looks and feels like it is 1,000 meters water resistant. So needless to say, this thing is an absolute tank. It is, of course, in that stunning cobalt blue, and it essentially is a bulked up version of their Mako 500m diver. So with that said, let's go ahead and take a closer look. Okay, so as you can see, this thing is really quite gorgeous. It has so many fine details, and now that there's just a little bit more breathing space to take in all the details, to me visually I think it does appear a little bit more balanced than the Mako does, because it just has a little bit more room to work with because it is on a larger canvas. And as you can see, quite the larger canvas. This thing is an absolute tank. The proportions, instead of feeling here kind of like a smaller SKX, this one feels more like a Planet Ocean, and it's an absolute beast. So I'll definitely be popping this guy here, you know, in and out of frame. This is the Mako 500, so basically about half as water resistant, and but not quite half the size, but maybe feeling like it's about half the size sometimes. I thought that this watch almost were a bit too small at times because it did have so much going on. As you can see, the dial, especially in that kind of two-tone arrangement there, squeezes much of that dial down visually, so it does get kind of smushed, versus here it just has a little bit more of an open breathing space feel to it. But of course, a little bit about this watch. This actually right now is going for $499, which is a launch special. I'm not sure how much the price will rise in the future, or depending on batch to batch, but Zelos is really good about making these things extremely affordable. Now, the diameter is, of course, 44 millimeters, and then you have a 16.5 millimeter height. Now, that is quite thick. That's up there with, you know, chronograph thick. So, of course, that all has to do with the fact that this is 1,000 meters water resistant. Now, if you look at that kind of other watches similarly spec, they are going to also be just as thick there, if not thicker. So it's something that, you know, it comes with the territory. If you're looking for a watch that's going to be this overbuilt and this kind of and be in this range where it's going to go to those depths, you're going to be looking for something that's about this size. And then, of course, the lug to lug is a nice 50 millimeters, which is not too bad considering the width there. So it does still wear really quite well. And then this is, of course, fully made in 316L surgical grade stainless steel. It does have a flat sapphire crystal, 120 click unidirectional bezel. Really outstanding action there. Nice and crisp. Nothing to complain about. Everything lines up quite perfectly there. Really nice. As you can see, even with the gloves on, the grip was not an issue. And then it does have a signed and loomed crown there. And then, of course, this insert is also, the ceramic insert is also loomed, fully loomed as well, which is really nice. And then the movement inside is just a Swiss automatic Sellita SW200. So not a bad choice here, but of course, you know, nothing really sexy to write home about. But I think in a workhorse kind of watch, you're going to want a workhorse kind of movement. So I really don't see a problem with that. Now, as far as this gorgeous dial, as you can see, I'll let you guys get in on that. Wow. Thing is absolutely fantastic. It has that reflective kind of blue 3D textured dial. It has, of course, those nice applied indices, and it does not have a date, unlike the Mako there, which had the date at the 6th. This has no date option on it, and I'm sure a lot of it has to do with probably the spacing on where that date would actually go on a dial that size. So there is not a dial, there's not a date on this dial. It is actually fully loomed, as you can see, really gorgeously. And even some of the spots that you wouldn't think are loomed are actually loomed, as you'll see once we get to the loom shots here. But it is a nice mixture of C3 and BGW9. It is, of course, like I said, 1,000 meters water resistant. It has a, you know, fully everything solid, everything screw in, milled, clasp, has a dive extension there, so really nice. So really you're getting that basically, you know, you're checking pretty much every box when it comes to a modern tool diver. And then of course, with a more bulked up size, it does have a larger lug width at 22 millimeters. Then it tapers down to about 20, down to this ratcheting clasp here. Really nice. So let's go ahead and get this on. Okay, as you can see, this thing wears still pretty nicely considering the size. Now, if I bring it up close to the lens there, it's going to look quite huge. But that is, a lot of it has to do with the lens distortion. But if you actually take a look down here, you get a little bit of a better idea of how it looks on my 7¼ inch wrist. Of course, it does look large. It is a large watch, and it does have a ton of index markings there and everything. And the profile is quite tall, but nothing crazy. You know, I don't think it's overly tall. But I think this is definitely the type of watch for a certain demographic that are looking for those big, chunky, oversized timepieces. And then again, you know, this thing wears just like, I'd say, you know, one of the larger Planet Oceans, the modern ones with the thicker movements and whatnot. But I mean, it just has that feel, really nicely done. Of course, quite chunky, just lots of wrist presence, but nice and balanced because you do have that nice milled diver's clasp, so you don't have to worry about this feeling like it's going to slide anywhere. And then you do have some, you know, some micro adjusts there on the clasp, as you can see. And then you do have, you know, let's say it's getting a little hot. If you want to get a little relief, if you want, it's not a big deal. You can let it out a little bit. Or of course use that to ratchet it over a dive suit. So not too shabby there. Let's go ahead and move on to some low light transition shots. Okay, let's go ahead and hit the lights. As you can see, I did bring the Mako out very quickly there, so you could get a look at it in comparison. You can see the same similar types of markings are there as far as the loom goes. And then actually, let me turn it very quickly here so you can see that it does have that loomed, not super important, but just a nice touch there. It does have the loomed crown. So as you can see, really nice mixture there. Very legible, very bright. I could probably leave this on for quite a while and keep you guys entertained, but I know we all enjoy a good low light transition because, you know, my studio lights are very good at kind of simulating direct sunlight, but let's face it, you're not going to spend all of your time outside in the middle of a park or something like that. A lot of times you'll be going from indoors to outdoors, in and out of vehicles, in and out of buildings. So the nice thing here is you can get a little bit of a better idea of some of those colors and the way that they're going to play with the light. And the nice thing as well is you do get a nice idea of the finishing when you take a look at those brushings under lower light, because the brighter lights can definitely wash out a lot of those imperfections. Here you can kind of see how uniform the light rolls off of these links really nicely. almost has a more of a, almost like a hand finished brush on there, I think. Not totally like the super most uniform, but just super fine there, which I think is a nice touch. And then of course, if the light hits some of these high bevels there on the case, that's always nice. But let's go ahead and hit the lights and get some final thoughts. Now, all in all, I mean, it's much of the same as far as what you like about the Mako here. It's pretty much the larger one. If you thought this was too small, if you love this design and you said, hey, unfortunately I have an 8-inch wrist and that's gonna look really wrong on it, this is the perfect watch for you, because this is essentially a bulked up version. It does have, the handsets is a little bit more dynamic. But other than that, I mean, it's just pretty much more of what you like and less of what you don't. Especially, I think, with the non-two-tone design there. It's a really strong aesthetic. So if you have the real estate to rock something like this, oh, excuse me, definitely go right ahead and do that, because this, if you love big chunky dive watches, which I know there's a huge market for these, this could definitely be one that has way more fine details than you'll find in other big chunky dive watches in this range. And it's also going to be extremely capable. It's, you know, it has a nice Swiss movement, so it has that 8 ticks per second 4 hertz beat, and then you know, it's sapphires, brushed ceramic, fully loomed, just super cleanly done, great bevels, nice finishing on everything. Everything just feels really nice and well finished. So you're getting a lot of bang per buck, and then you get these fine details as well to give it a little bit of personality. You know, on the wrist, it does feel like a large watch, and it does feel like 1,000 meters water resistant. I've had watches that were like 500 meters water resistant that felt huge like this. So it's nice that this actually has the specs to kind of back up the size, which means it's just that much more engineered. Again, if I would say I would compare it to something else that's a more popular type of fit, instead of comparing it to an SKX or like a, you know, a 50 Atmos, I would say it's probably more comparable to something like a Modern Planet Ocean when it comes to the way that it's going to wear. Comparable models, I mean, there's a ton in this segment of large overbuilt divers, but you know, there are very few that have the same kind of cohesive design that's found here. I think the design is really what sets Zelos apart. Of course, they do have a lot of other great attributes in the fit, the finish, the pricing, but I think the designs are really cool and something different that really speak to a certain brand aesthetic and not just a model aesthetic. So I think that's great. The bottom line, you know, you get a lot of watch for your money, especially at these, of course, launch special and early bird style prices. So if you like the video, please do hit like, and if you haven't already, please subscribe for more content just like this, and don't forget to let me know what you guys think in the comments below. Thanks, guys.